So I grew up with an undiagnosed panic disorder, and I suffered great, exquisite distress pretty much every single day of my life. It was organized around separation. So it was anytime I had to leave my mother, I would panic. As I was growing up, I knew there was something wrong with me. And I knew it because it interfered with my everyday life in ways I watched my friends and my siblings not be bothered. So my childhood was really filled with a lot of dread and chaos and confusion and, misattunement and misapprehension. But then I had this realization that it was harder for me to live my life avoiding everything. And it would be easier if I stayed alive to face every single thing I feared.
Hi, welcome to MedCircle's It's All in Your Head podcast. I'm your host, Jackie Colbeth, and it's great to be with you. Today, we are going to be talking about panic disorder with Amanda Stern. Amanda grew up with an undiagnosed panic disorder and was plagued with the fear that her friends and family would be taken from her or pass away. She detailed this experience in her memoir, Little Panic: Dispatches from an Anxious Life. Her fiction, nonfiction, and poetry have appeared in, among other places, the New York Times and the New York Times Magazine. Amanda is also a mental health advocate, speaker, and advisory board member for Bring Change to Mind. She is the author of the novel The Long Haul and 11 books for children written under pseudonyms. Her weekly newsletter, How to Live, draws on her personal struggles and offers the best of what she's learned from decades of inquiry. Amanda is an inspiration to so many, and we are so excited she took time out of her busy schedule to chat with us. Amanda, welcome to It's All in Your Head.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, we are very happy to have you. This is a topic that our audience definitely wants to learn more about, as do I. We always do. And it's something I feel like has become so prevalent, or at least more diagnosed than usual in this day and age. So we're just really pumped to listen to your experience. I think what's super helpful, at least it is for me, is context. And that usually starts around childhood. And I think a lot of times people underestimate just how perceptive children are, and when they know maybe they aren't feeling right or something isn't really well, they are often dismissed, and I think sometimes they're more honest than a lot of adults. So I think it would be super helpful if you could share with our audience sort of, how you grew up and what childhood was like in the sense of discovering what it was like to struggle with this anxiety.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I will say that I've never experienced life without it. I was so young. I was probably still in a crib when I first experienced anxiety or panic or whatever it was called. Whatever it's called when you're an infant. I think it's called something else. But yeah, so I grew up with an undiagnosed panic disorder, and I suffered great, exquisite distress pretty much every single day of my life. I maybe had a week off here and there where I would be released from the phenomenal dread that was living inside my body at all times. And it was organized around separation. So it was anytime I had to leave my mother, I would panic, and I had to leave my mother all the time. Right. I had to go to school in the morning. I had to go to my father's every other weekend. Yeah. And this is starting at age 2. I was very, very young when my parents separated, and I was too young to be separating from my mom to go to my father's every other weekend. But it was a totally different time. And,
yes,
I don't even know if the word anxiety was on anyone's lips. It was definitely not in the ether.
Right.
So as I was growing up, I knew there was something wrong with me. And I knew it because it interfered with my everyday life in ways I watched my friends and my siblings not be bothered,
Right.
by the same things that really incapacitated me. So
Yep.
I knew that I was suffering or struggling with something that other people weren't, and there was no name for it. And the trouble with being little,
Yep.
being a child and having pain, mental pain and visible pain, is that your ability for emotional awareness is exceeds your capacity for language. So
So well put.
you're living in this cognitive dissonance
Yeah.
where you're holding onto something that is monstrous. It's so big. You just don't have the capability or the capacity to express it in any way verbally. So what's happening is that adults around you begin to assume and guess on your behalf. And most usually they are incorrect. And I actually will say that this morning I ran into an acquaintance of mine in the dog park, and he was with his daughter, and he was telling me that he was writing little books for her to make life easier for him and his wife as parents. And I was like, that's amazing. So give me an example. And he said, well, I'm writing a book about how to get excited for bedtime and how to look forward to bedtime because she doesn't like to go to bed. And so I'm making a book where she's just, everything is exciting. And I was like, that's great. I wonder though if you might be leaving something out because perhaps you're assuming that she doesn't want to go to bed because it's boring, which is not really a reason that kids don't want to go to bed. It's usually about something else.
Right.
And
Great point.
So I see this a lot with parents is that they assume something.
Sure.
And but they're not assuming it from the child's point of view. They're assuming it from the adult's point of view. Right. So I suggested that he think about whether his daughter didn't want to go to bed because she didn't want to miss out on anything or she didn't want to separate. And if that were the case, then perhaps the angle of the book should be inclusive of other, maybe 5 things and see which one she relates to. Yeah. And then focus the book on that. I see that a lot. And I when I was growing up, a lot of things were assumed on my behalf.
Yes.
And one of those assumptions was that I had we called it a learning disability when I was growing up, but that I had learning challenges. And I did have learning challenges. And I had learning challenges because I was having panic attacks.
Right.
And when you're having a panic attack, you can't learn.
No.
So what they did for me was they ended up sending me for testing to see, to identify the learning challenges. However, when you have a panic disorder and it is organized around being tested and separating and all that, you don't do well on tests.
No, that's got to exacerbate the living hell out of it.
Yeah, it made it worse. So,
yes.
So my childhood was really filled with a lot of dread and chaos and confusion and, misattunement and misapprehension. And, and it wasn't anyone's fault. It's not like, my parents weren't raised to be attuned emotionally. They grew up in the 50s, so they didn't grow up with parents. They grew up with, people taking care of them.
Right.
Were, other people. So,
sure.
So that is my very long-winded answer about what my childhood felt like. And
no, long-winded. No. Thank you for sharing that. That is super helpful. So during that time, you're experiencing all this, and for our audience, obviously, I really want for you to read Amanda's book, and you will get such an unbelievable, you'll really be able to feel what it was like, experiencing this. And Amanda, I mean, you're such a great writer. I had like anxiety, which I can get easily to begin with, but that just tells me what a great, it's so descriptive. And so as you're feeling this, is there anybody around that's kind of like, geez, I'm maybe a little concerned, like, maybe Amanda's struggling and I want to be able to help her. Obviously, as we know, a lot of people, certain generations don't necessarily have the tools for that. But was there anyone like, geez, we got to try something, or anyone that kind of like sweeped in and tried to alleviate some of the anxiety, maybe not successfully, but they gave it a shot?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that my mother really wanted to alleviate my pain.
Yes.
But because she didn't know anything about anxiety or, mental illness or panic or anything, she did all the wrong things.
Sure.
And it's not, again, not her fault.
No.
She did what she thought would be helpful, which was to remove the obstacles from my life.
Okay.
So instead of helping me to face my fear, she removed my fear so that I wouldn't have to face it. And that made things so much worse for me, because what it does when you allow someone to sort of get away with it and, or not have to deal with the looming thing they have to do, the big presentation, the going away, is that it sort of validates for the person who is scared that they are right to be scared, that the world is too hard for them to handle.
Yeah, I could see.
If the world weren't too hard for them to handle, they would be able to face this thing with some help. So no one helped me to face anything. And because they didn't know how to do it themselves. So instead, these things were removed, sleepovers, for instance.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it.
Me neither. Growing up, no way. My mother knew she'd be getting a call. It may be around, like the ass crack of dawn, and or even before then. But yes, I when I read that in the book, I identified with that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I had one, and I had to come home. But, if there were birthday parties, slumber parties, or anything like that, and I would say, I can't do it. And there was never a period of time where she would, or anyone would be like, you can do it. And here's how. Yeah. And let's take it slow and let's break it down. And, so no one helped me to manage my emotions or, my emotions in the face of hardship. And so my life just became harder and harder and smaller because of that.
Yeah. And when did you feel like, was there a point where you felt like you have such knowledge of this now and how that pattern was set in and why, and it's totally understandable. Was there a point sort of as you grew up and, as we become adults, was there a point where you were like, okay, like some of this stuff isn't getting removed? Was there sort of like, oh man, is the jig up here? Like, is there anything that prompted? Because obviously you have such agency and you've taken such control. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if there was a point where you were like, okay, it's been nice that all this stuff, obviously nice in the respect where it was helpful in the immediate moment, but hindsight's 2020. Was there ever a point where you were like, okay, this is getting like really difficult now that I have to kind of manage this myself? Yes.
So right before I was diagnosed, I went 25 years. And
I know. Yes. Wow.
Brutal, really brutal. So when I was, and I'm going to be honest, I've been saying for years and years and years that it was 25, but I may be wrong.
Oh, okay.
I may have been older.
Okay.
And I may have been like 26.
Sure.
I don't think I was 27, but I was either 25 or 26. And anyway, I it just got worse and worse. My anxiety got so bad that I couldn't leave my house.
Right.
And so I spent 3 weeks in my apartment, unable to even really open the window and I could open the window, but I couldn't stick my head out.
Right.
Because I don't even remember why. I just remember it being like, this air is going to kill me.
Right.
I need the air in my house. That's safe air. Everything was safe and dangerous. And I, couldn't have anyone come over. I thought they would like breathe up all the available air. And it just got to be a point where, even thinking about leaving my house would send me to the bathroom to throw up in fear. And I was sort of at the end, and I thought, this is not a way to live. I can't live like this. It's too hard to live my life avoiding everything.
Yeah.
And so I decided that was it. I felt like, so I'm going to just end my life. I feel like this is the right time, and I have no other options. I don't know what else to do. But, I always had this weird sort of suspicion or paranoia that I was crazy, and that my mother knew I was crazy and was just keeping it from me.
Right.
And I think that's very common in people who have a long-term undiagnosed illness.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I thought, well, I'm gonna call my mother first, and I want to hear her say what's the name of this thing is, and then I'm done, and then I'm gonna end my life. And so I called her, and she was like, I don't like the way you sound, and so she sent a cab over to me to go to her house. And when I was in the cab, I had all this, he like put the lock down, and I like panicked that he was going to kidnap me.
Of course.
And then murder me. And then I was like, wait a minute, why am I scared? I want to die. And then I was like, well, maybe I don't want to die. If I'm afraid this guy's going to murder me, wouldn't I want him to murder me if I want it? Isn't it easier?
Right.
So I had this whole like weird like spiral of epiphanies that was like, well, I guess I don't want to die. And then I thought, but then I had this realization that it was harder for me to live my life avoiding everything. And it would be easier if I stayed alive to face every single thing I feared. It would be easier for me to face my fears than to live life avoiding them.
Wow.
And that was my realization in the back of that cab on the way to my mom's house. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to live my life walking towards my fears, because I know ultimately that'll make my life bigger, and I'll feel stronger, and I'll grow.
Right.
And the next morning, my mom sent me to her therapist, and in 10 minutes, he diagnosed me. And
wow.
Yeah. So
was that a relief? Did you feel a sense of relief, or were you still a little like, I'm baffled?
I felt relieved. I felt like that you have just said my name. Yes. Like I've been searching for my name, and you've said my name. Yes. And so, I felt it was very like, oh my God, that's it. But my confusion was that my whole life I was looking for the name, and I thought I had this mistaken belief that as soon as I heard the name, I would be like cured. That the name was the remedy. And it isn't the remedy. It's just the name of the condition for which you need to find remedies.
It's the beginning. It's the beginning of the exploration.
Right. So, but it was, it was major, and it put everything into place and made a lot of sense. And it made a lot of sense to everyone around me who I told, and, made a sense to my mother and my father, just to everyone. Wow. And, so it was really a revelation, and it was also sort of embarrassing because, when you're like,
I do. Yeah.
When you're just like, I know the name. What is the word I'm looking for? What is that word? And it's like you can't come up with the
Right.
word, and the word's like epiphany. And someone else says, and you're like, yes.
Right.
It felt like that. Like, oh my God, yes, panic. Duh.
Yes.
That's the word I've been looking for.
Yes.
And I've been like circling around it without being able to, come up with it.
Well, yes. And a lot of times I think, and this is where ignorance, as anyone who's, both of us, we've been diagnosed with conditions. There's a lot of ignorance around certain things. And people make a major presumption that there are only certain situations in which a panicky feeling should arise. And if you feel panic in other situations, that's, looked upon as like not the right way to handle it. Or, I'm certainly preaching to the choir here, right?
Yeah.
With how that's how society thinks about that and kind of deals with that. But it is truly, and this is what I really want, the audience and people watching to take away, is this isn't like a little tightness in somebody's chest. Like, oh, I have to get up in front of like 10 colleagues, or, that's a natural physiological reaction to something. But panic disorder is not that. It's like the equivalent of calling a headache, migraine, just a headache.
Do you want me to explain panic disorder?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So a panic attack is when you have sort of an oversized reaction to something that is threatening to you, but perhaps not actually literally threatening.
Sure.
So that's a sort of a panic attack from the place of someone who has an anxiety disorder, someone who doesn't have any disorder and has a panic attack when they're walking down the street because of an actual danger. So they, so someone with, not a disorder, can have a panic attack because there's a danger. There's a physical threat.
Yes.
And they are panicking due to that threat.
Yes.
When you have a condition, an anxiety or panic condition, you're like an alarm system that doesn't work. So, an alarm system in your house is supposed to alert you to intruders from the outside.
Right.
But when you have a panic disorder, the alarm system, instead of alerting you to people breaking in, it alerts you to any movement inside the house. So, a dog will pass.
Great way to put it.
And the alarm will go off.
Yep.
And so that is a person with a panic disorder. Their alarm is constantly going off as though they are being physically threatened. It feels as though there is an actual, literal, life-threatening experience about to happen to you. Yeah. And it feels that way because physiologically, the cascade in your body that is set off is biological and can be measured in a doctor's office. You can measure it. You can take someone's pulse. You can hear the speed of their heart. You can, their blood pressure goes up. So your face gets hot. But beyond the biological, physiological aspects of panic attack is the mental and emotional aspects of it. And you feel like you're so alarmed by what's happening inside your body and you try to make sense of it, but you can't the only sense you can make is that you're dying.
Right. I'm having a heart attack, or I'm about to,
So you're in great distress because and the reason is because it's not synchronous with the experience. It's out of alignment with whatever is happening. So it feels like, oh my God, I'm in this situation right now and my body has decided that I will die or that I'm going to have a stroke or a heart attack, or it just comes out of nowhere.
Yep.
And so you're trying to identify what it is that feels unidentifiable. And because your heart is like pounding and speeding and you feel a fear, an intense life-threatening fear.
Yes.
that you're in danger.
Yep.
You can sometimes separate from your body and float up to the sky. You can feel like you're going to throw up. You can feel like you're going to pass out. You can feel like you're that actual regular person walking down the street and someone with a gun comes up to them.
Yes.
And says, I'm gonna end your life.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely it's terrifying.
Yeah. So when you have a panic disorder, there's no trigger. You panic because you're afraid to panic.
Right. That's real. That feeling is a real feeling. You can't make it feel unreal, with feelings. That's the bitch about feelings. Right.
Exactly. But so the actual definition of a panic disorder is panicking in anticipation of panicking.
So do things like exposure therapy?
Yes.
Because I'm curious, obviously feeling this way is scary and stressful. And I'm wondering what types of different therapies or things, and you're so well read just with your experience on this. Are there certain things that you were able to learn or do that at least gave you maybe a little bit of relief or feeling that you're, moving forward?
Well, for me, I didn't start with the therapy.
Yes.
So I things were backward for me.
Yes.
I started with the exposure therapy by myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I started with, I'm just going to face all my fears. And
you didn't.
But I'm a very specific person, and I advise against being like me because I quit drugs cold turkey.
Yeah,
I quit
me too.
cold turkey. It's the way to go.
Yes.
So, yeah. So because all right, when you have a panic disorder or anxiety, you're usually very concrete. Things are either black or white. They're this or that. It's all or nothing. You're very concrete. So that it makes sense that I would do something very extreme. It's all this. So, so I did do the things that scared me that I want. So it's not just that I do things that scare me. I want to make this very clear. It's that the things I wanted in life scared me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I wanted that life. So for instance, I wanted to be on stage, but I had stage fright. And it was so bad that I would throw up just thinking about being on stage. Yeah. So if I wanted to be on stage, I had to do it. And I had to face that stage fright and get through it enough to learn how to manage my stage fright so that I could do it. Yeah. So things like that, reading from my book in public, writing a book, publishing a book, writing a play, all these things that are privileges to do. It's not like these are horrible traumas that I had to do. I had to force myself to do. No, they're extraordinary things. But as a person with a panic disorder, they felt terrifying and undoable to me. And so that is what I chose to do. I chose the life I wanted. I chose the life I was afraid to have.
Yes.
That's what I did. But yes, to your question, cognitive behavioral therapy is very helpful. Okay,
great.
And that's just a way to sort of reframe the way that you think about things, the way that you think about things in black and white terms.
Oh, it was the most helpful thing to me going through CBT. For me, in my bipolar 2 disorder, it was game changer. I think CBT is like tried and true.
Yeah, it's amazing. And can I recommend a book?
Yes, please.
So this book just blew my mind and changed my life. Mm-hmm. And it's got the worst title. So I just need you to bear with the title and buy the book anyway.
Right.
I have nothing to do with this book. I've never met this person who wrote it. I just the book and I are a little bit married. Yeah. But the book doesn't know it's married to me. Right. It's called
Best kind of marriage.
It's called The Worry Cure. And it's by Robert Leahy, Leahy. It is fantastic. And he's a CBT therapist. And basically what it is it's CBT for you.
That's awesome.
And it's incredible. So that book is amazing. And then exposure therapy, which I did on my own. And
I still, Amanda, don't know how
recommend
you did that on your own.
either.
It is one of the hardest things, even like being privy to watching, like an exposure therapy session. It is infinitely more difficult when you are witnessing it than one could ever fathom.
it's
You know,
beyond-
like huge.
I mean, I think that for people without panic or anxiety, for them to really understand it, they have to think of the thing that scares them the most.
Yes.
Is being buried alive the thing that scares you the most? Because that is when you feel that in your body, when you feel your greatest fear, that is what people with anxiety and panic feel.
Yes.
On an average day.
Absolutely.
Just feeling some anxiety or panic.
Absolutely. I find it akin. I've had lots of panic attacks before. Anxiety is really a nice chunk sort of my mix on my spectrums. It's a trail mix.
Good cocktail.
And I remember thinking to myself at the time I was having panic attacks as a teen. And then it wasn't until later when honestly I thought this is very random, but I was on a safari in South Africa and I thought I was about to get pounced by two cheetahs that I had like spooked. And they flipped around and they looked at me and I remember like hearing all I could hear. I couldn't hear people. I'm just hearing my heart pound. And then I'm feeling the burn, like the sweat, right? Yeah. It's like, you look like you dumped a puddle on me. And I feel like it happened like almost instantaneously. And afterward, I made it, obviously, afterward, I remember saying I was with my father and I said, that felt like my first panic attack. And I had never had a almost near death experience. But when I tell people that, I say, I'm not being dramatic.
Right.
Like for me, having had both, there's a huge parallel to be drawn there with what you are going through in that moment.
It's interesting. I've never thought of it in comparison to like a near-death experience.
For me, it felt like that at least. I remember going.
I think that's really apt. I think that there's perhaps some things missing from it, but it's very, there are definitely parallels and similarities because it's not that we are, I mean, in that case, yes, perhaps. With the cheetahs, you actually might have cheated death. But while it can feel like a near-death experience when you're panicking, that's just the feeling. It's not the fact.
No. And I was nailed into my head. Feelings aren't facts. And I took such solace in that because I gave them fact status.
Yeah. I think that's one of the early things that I learned that helped me so much. And because we get so confused, because when you feel things deeply, they feel true.
Yes.
And how could they not be true? They're so, potent and extreme. And so, so you just sort of start buying your beliefs. Like I'm going to give you an example.
Yeah.
Or the listeners an example. Like, let's say you're on a dating app and you reach out to someone and they don't text you back.
Yep.
That day. And then they don't text you back the next day. And then you're sort of like, screw you, man.
Right.
And so you text them the next day like, oh, I'm not pretty enough for you. And in that span of time, what's happened is you've created an entire story.
Yes.
That has nothing to do with this other person.
Right.
It has to do with you.
Great point.
And your own reality, which is not reality. It's just your own little, spiraling fantasy in your own little head.
Yes.
And those are feelings.
Yes.
And when we send that text that says, oh, I'm not pretty enough for you, we're mistaking our feelings for facts.
Yes.
And we need to really be wary of doing that because I've had so many emails to me from people saying, so I guess not, huh? And I'm like, I actually have like 14 jobs,
Right. I was busy.
It's not about you. And so, but I understand what's happening to them.
Yes.
And
yes.
I also understand I don't want to date anyone who is not evolved enough to know that my not responding to them within 3 days has nothing to do with them. I've never met them.
Right.
They are unknown to me. So
Right.
it can't have anything to do with them. So, anyway, so that to me was a really like a formative understanding, a formative like template that I learned. And I do to this day. And facing my fears, I do to this day.
Yeah.
It's a lifelong endeavor. It's not like I'll do this for 3 months.
No, and it's a shame when expectations, and I say this frequently on the podcast, I think a lot of it with the frustration with mental health is there's these unrealistic expectations as if you're going to get cured with a pill and you're going to get cured with one session. And then, you confront it and you deal with it and then it's behind you in a rear view, never to be heard from again. And it couldn't be that couldn't be a worse or more inaccurate, portrayal, but it's a constant, it's a daily thing. And I'm wondering what do you do, like maybe on the daily or something regularly where you're like, because you are so successful, you get so much done. I have to believe that you've got like some tips or things that you do to keep propelling you along the path.
There's not enough time for all my tips. Like that is how tippy I am. I am like one big hack. Like,
I love that. I love that.
My entire life is built upon hacks.
I love that. And we have a term for it now. When the term hack came out, I was I was like, life hack, give them to me or just take all mine. I have so many. Okay, so because I'm a writer and a performer sometimes, or I used to be pre-pandemic, I'm very good at pretending. I'm really good at buying my own drinking your own Kool-Aid. I get it.
Exactly. And all right. So this is not about anxiety. This is just about how do I get so much stuff done?
Sure.
And a lot of it is that I'm driven to do it. I have a fire in me for it. So I love it. And it's what I want to be doing. And when people are like, what do you do for fun? And I'm like, I work.
Right.
And they're like, no, that's not fun. And I was like, no, but it is.
No, but it is if you're fortunate enough to feel, yes.
So, but I don't want to do it all the time, so what I'm working on 2 books right now. I have a weekly newsletter. I do talks. I do a lot of different things. And so what I'll do is if I'm like, I haven't published a story in such a long time. I should probably publish a story.
Yeah.
I'll be like, okay, I'm going to pretend that I work for me and that as my own assistant.
Yeah.
I've been asked by my boss, I'm my own assistant and my boss is me. So Amanda has asked me to pick a short story that could be submitted to magazines, to work on it for her, just to work on it for her. And because I'm such a people pleaser, it works for me because then I can be like, I really want my boss to love, it's a whole mind game, but
sure, but it works.
It works for me.
Is the point.
Yeah. I mean, I do it for cleaning my house,
Yes.
It'll be like, I pretend that I am a housekeeper for someone really, really, really rich. And that, but if I don't clean the way that this person likes to clean, I'm not going to get my money. And so I just am a weirdo. And so I'm doing a million hacks like that. But for anxiety, I've been in therapy for so long.
Sure.
Talk therapy.
Yep.
I've been in for 20 years and with the same therapist who.
Oh, that's amazing. Wow. That's got to be a record.
Oh, it is. It's Guinness.
Oh, you're blessed.
It's Ripley's, believe it or not. It's the whole, I'm going in some getting a trophy.
You should.
Yeah.
You really should.
I've been nominated for an Oscars. I'm getting EGOT. I'm getting EGOT. And, Yeah. Well, come on.
That would be the longest relationship I've ever had with anyone ever.
Same here. All right. I'm going to tell you something. I'm actually downplaying it because it's 23 years and I'm just embarrassed.
You're rounding down until it's 25. We don't even need to worry about that.
Well, I'm ending. We're ending.
Oh, well, it's not like you didn't put the time in.
Right? Yeah. I was like, it's been a minute. I think maybe wind it down. So
what's that like? Because
23.
I've usually just like moved in that, like I've moved states and they can't treat me over state lines. What's it like? I'm wondering with someone, that you've known, you've come to know for so long. Is it like acrimonious or is it like, we wish you the best, Amanda? Like you're doing great.
It's beyond anything like either of those things. She is my mother. Like she raised me, Wow. She saved my life.
Aww.
She saved my life. She's kind of a miracle. Like I was useless, I was just useless. And I didn't know how to walk down the street without having a panic attack.
Yep.
She saved my life. And it was all just sort of talk therapy. And, it's psycho, what's it called? Not psycho, it's, oh my God, what? Psychodynamic therapy.
Okay.
Which is just a fancy name for like talk therapy,
Sure.
But about consciousness and getting to subconscious, exploring the subconscious and unconscious and conscious and all the consciousness. So it's been amazing. Like the whole treatment has been amazing and I've changed entirely. And I've recently felt for like the past year, like I'm ready to go. I'm ready to like, split, like be independent from my mother.
Sure.
And because really I have that relationship with her where I get annoyed with her like I would my mother.
Right.
And
right.
she asks me technical, like questions about technology, like my mother, like she's my mother. And
totally.
So I just was finally like, I brought it up and I was like, I feel a little bit like I might be ready to like try the world on my own.
Right.
And she was like, okay, well, let's talk about it. So we talked about it. And then she was like, I do think you are ready too. But let's have a period of 2 months where we sort of talk about everything you've learned and make sure that, you know how to apply the essentials.
Yeah.
And so we're finishing totally in July. And awesome. Every session has been kind of amazing where, it's almost like she'll be like, and what is the lesson there? And I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. So she, but it's great. It's great. And I, again, as someone who faces her fears, this was a huge fear for me. And what happened?
The thought of having the conversation, right? It would have given me anxiety just having to go in like, hey, I'm thinking about, it's almost like it to a degree, you feel like you're breaking up with someone like special. It gives you that anxiety.
Oh, it was hard. It was really scary, but I really surprised myself by bringing it. And I surprised myself because I did it in a way that surprised me, where I said to her, this is really hard and really sad because you changed my life. You saved my life and you changed it. And, I was crying and, I said, well, I just told her how I felt about her and what she had done for me. And it was that I think that a lot of people maybe miss when they're ending something is that, and I wanted to make sure she knew that. And like, I'll tell her again and again, but I think that she also wanted to make sure that it wasn't just an end, but a long, like a landing.
Absolutely. It's like when I'm done with my workday and the way my brain is comprised is you have to let me come on the descent. So
Right.
if you start knocking at me for something at 5 or 6, that's just not the greatest time
Right.
because and I'm very open about that now. Instead of biting your head off, the older you get, I would,
Right.
hey, let me just like land this plane. We're at
Mhm.
10,000. I'll do it in an hour or so,
Right.
but just, I think that's great. That's such a special
Yeah.
relationship. And
It's
to hear
amazing.
you talk about this person's really touching.
Yeah. I do want to say, though, the original question
Yeah.
was, what are my tips for anxiety? And I never really gave them. But I do want to, I gave my tips about work.
Please.
So I do want to say my
Great.
for anxiety is that if you can get good, and it takes time or not, some people just are like this.
Yeah.
If you can get good at identifying where your distress is in
Yeah.
your body,
Yeah.
and start giving a name to what that distress is signifying to you,
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm about to have a conversation that's going to be hard, and I feel like a tightness in my throat.
Yeah.
So you link it. You're like, okay, I feel tightness in my throat about talking to this person. So this is fear.
Yeah.
This is like what happens to me when I'm scared.
Yeah.
And so I'm scared. So, all right, so what do I do when I'm scared? I breathe. And so, you have these sort of techniques for different sensations in your body. And
Okay, great.
usually the technique is to breathe, but it's really smart, I think, to start learning how to identify your feelings inside your own body, because you can sit with those feelings and then slowly take your time to put words around them. So you know what you're feeling. And as soon as you know what you're feeling, you can often deal with the concreteness of it. When it's just an emotion or just a sort of a sensation in your body, it can feel overwhelming.
Yes.
So the key is to identify the sensation and then to put words to it.
Yeah.
And once you put the words to it, then you're like, okay, this is what I'm dealing with.
Yes. And the conundrum, it sounds, is it's hard to get clarity in the middle of feeling in major panic. I mean, it's like it's there all along, but you almost have to it sounds like just like sit and almost like white knuckle it if you have to. And then it.
Right. But the key is to do this when you're not panicking. The key is to constantly be assessing your body for sensation. And so when you're online and you have to order something and all of a sudden you feel like nervous,
right?
You'd be like, okay, this is nervous. I'm nervous. I'm nervous to order.
Right.
Oh, I'm nervous because I have to speak out loud.
Right.
So you start slowly getting to identify what it is so that when you're in a panic, you can be like, oh, I'm not dying. I have this feeling, and that feeling is nervous.
Yes.
This feeling is scared. It's almost like it's a way to manage what's happening by identifying the sensation instead of giving over to I'm having a heart attack. Because if you're like, oh, this is familiar. I know what this is.
Right.
If you begin to build a language of sensation in your body and create a vocabulary for these experiences, then you can really, you're building a language for your body. And it'll help you get through really hard, big moments,
No, I love that. That's so applicable. I think it's especially too when I always think there are stigmatized emotions like anger, sadness. And I feel like if you ever feel these things, people are like, well, just, don't feel that. And I feel sometimes as soon as those come up,
right.
There's almost this sick conditioning of no, not going to look at this, not going to.
Is that the no from you or a no from someone else?
So if that's it, a no from someone else.
Okay. So the no from someone else, I think this is really vital too.
Yeah.
Nothing is about you. Nothing.
Right. I have to remind
Nothing.
myself.
Everything that other people don't want you to do is about them. Everything that people do want you to do is about them. It's never about you. It can't be.
Right.
It can't be.
Right.
And so whenever someone is making you feel like you're feeling the wrong way,
Right.
just remind yourself there's no right way or wrong way to be a human being.
Absolutely.
So however you are is human. We're all human. So however you feel, whatever you feel, it's part of the human condition.
Yes.
And because someone else is uncomfortable with it, just means someone else is uncomfortable with it.
Right. And that's where it starts and that's where it ends.
Right.
Sometimes, I know with myself, I'll pick up a storyline, liking to read, liking my stories. And it's easy to run with that when it's, it's not that deep, as some of my friends say, if something upsetting. I think, you've pretty much answered what I always like to leave the episode on. And that is, if there's anyone watching this, to those who are watching this today, who are in the thick of their panic disorder and their anxiety and they're watching this, what advice would you give to those who are hurting the most right now?
I guess I would say a few things. One, just because something feels scary doesn't mean it's dangerous. So your panic and your anxiety, it feels dangerous, you know, but it's not. It's just a feeling. And that's where you're confusing the facts for the feelings. So facts and feelings, not the same thing. And fear is not actually dangerous. It's a feeling. And also that, having anxiety and panic is really about never having been taught how to manage your emotions.
Yeah.
And you weren't taught, or you didn't learn from the right person, or you didn't learn in the right ways, or it doesn't matter why, really. What matters is that your relationship to your emotions is not congruent. And so the best part about being in that situation is that you can learn how to be self-reliant and how to be strong. And it's not hard to find the resources. They're all over.
Yeah.
But, I would say if you are really suffering, buy The Worry Cure. It's amazing. Also, Tamar Chansky has great books. Another tip I'm going to give you.
Yeah, please.
For those who have suffered, even those who didn't suffer in childhood. But I found this really, I started doing something that no one else without children does, which is to read books for parents about childhood anxiety. So I read parenting books about childhood anxiety because I had childhood anxiety.
Right. Who better to dig in?
So to read about what I should have gotten teaches me what to give myself. Yeah. And so I think that that's a really good place to start too. Tamar Chansky has 2 books. One is Freeing Your Child from Anxiety. And that's a great one. I've read that. And Freeing Yourself from Anxiety. So I think that if you have at least these 3 resources, right? That you have something concrete to look forward to and to start with. And it does get, if you work on it, you'll get better and you'll be stronger for it, and you'll be richer. You'll be a richer person for it, emotionally, not financially.
Can't promise that.
It hasn't happened to me. So.
I don't know about that. Amanda, I can't thank you enough for coming on. when I read your book, I just was propelled to reach out and ask you to have a conversation with us, because I just think you're a very impressive person, but you're a very strong person. And I know that our audience, and I certainly did, got so much out of our chat today. So thank you again.
Right. Thank you so much. This was a real pleasure.
Thank you all for joining today's conversation with Amanda. If you visit medcircle.com, you can access tons of other conversations, including weekly workshops with our credentialed doctors and award-winning video library featuring almost 1,000 educational videos. Become a member of our community today. Visit medcircle.com to learn more. And thank you for listening to It's All in Your Head.